Steelers Nation, come on in. The conversation around the Pittsburgh Steelers changed completely the moment the league made its decision. There's no way to talk about where this team stands right now without starting exactly here. The NFL handed down a 2-game suspension to DK Metcalf following the incident with a Lions fan. The appeal is already in motion, but the impact of that decision is already echoing inside the locker room and exploding across the fan base. This goes far beyond losing a wide receiver for a couple of weeks. We're talking about discipline, accountability, player protection, and how a single moment can shake the direction of a season that has become fragile, tense, and at the same time, extremely decisive. The Steelers' history has always been built in moments of pressure, and it's precisely in scenarios like this that the identity of the franchise is truly tested. If this topic hits you the same way, drop a like on the video right now and be part of this black and gold movement. This is Steelers football. This is intensity. This is real football. According to the information laid out, the suspension stems from an incident in which Metcalf grabbed the fan by the shirt, pulled him down, said something to him, and shoved him back. It's important to be precise here, because the narrative matters. He did not punch the fan, despite early claims and online exaggerations. What happened was caught on camera, but what led up to it was not. Metcalf's camp has stated that the fan used racial slurs and made deeply inappropriate comments about his mother, language that would clearly violate the NFL's fan code of conduct. Even more concerning, there is an indication that this fan had a prior history of harassing Metcalf at that same stadium, and yet was still allowed to be present and remain in the game after the incident. That detail alone raises serious questions about stadium security and the league's responsibility to protect players from repeated abuse. From a purely football standpoint, the punishment feels heavy. 2 games is more than many expected, especially when compared to other recent incidents around the league involving players and fans. There is a growing sense that mitigating factors should matter here. The presence of security and a uniformed police officer nearby who did not intervene, the alleged history of harassment, and the nature of the physical contact itself all complicate what looks simple on paper. Still, there's one reality that cannot be ignored. Once you are in uniform, you cannot put your hands on a fan. The NFL cannot allow that precedent to stand, regardless of provocation, and that is why some level of suspension was inevitable. Where this becomes especially painful for Steelers fans is the timing. Metcalf's absence immediately changes the offensive equation. He is the clear #1 receiver, and there is no clean replacement for what he brings to the field. The expectation internally is that Marquez Valdes-Scantling will take on a larger share of the reps, with Ben Skowronek filling in situationally and Roman Wilson seeing expanded opportunities. But let's be honest about this. None of those options replicate what Metcalf does. The Steelers do not throw the ball at a high volume, which softens the blows slightly, but losing your top wideout is never something you can just shrug off, especially heading into critical divisional matchups. And it's not just the suspension itself. The incident clearly affected Metcalf during the game. He dropped a pass. He was flagged for offensive pass interference, a call many felt was weak, but a mistake that still went on the stat sheet. You could see it on the field. He was shaken. That's part of why this situation feels so layered. This wasn't a pattern of constant fan interaction or repeated loss of control throughout his career. This was specific, targeted, and yet, the consequences are now very real for the team. Inside the organization, there's also frustration directed inward. There was no immediate intervention from teammates, coaches, or team security to pull Metcalf away from the situation before it escalated. That's an organizational breakdown. Someone on the sideline has to recognize the danger of that moment and shut it down immediately. Those small failures can become big problems, and this one did. Financially, the stakes are massive for Metcalf. The suspension puts significant money at risk, including portions of his signing bonus, salary, and long-term guarantees. That reality adds another layer to the discussion about proportional punishment and how the league draws its lines. When a shove carries consequences this large, it raises questions about consistency and long-term precedent. Now zooming back out to the bigger picture, the Steelers still have to play football. The message from inside the locker room is simple. Excuses won't be accepted. If this team can't beat the Browns without one wide receiver, then it doesn't deserve to be talking about playoff aspirations anyway. That mindset is already forming, and it reflects a group that believes in its depth and its identity. Still, the margin for error is shrinking. A loss in Cleveland followed by a winner-take-all scenario against Baltimore in Week 18 is not where this team wants to be, especially after grinding all season without a late bye week. This is where the fan base is split. Some see the suspension as justified and necessary, a hard lesson learned the painful way. Others see a league that failed to protect a player from harassment and then came down harder than expected when the situation boiled over. Both perspectives can exist at the same time, and that's what makes this such a complicated moment for the Steelers as they try to move forward. So now it's your turn. Do you believe the NFL got this right with a 2-game suspension, or do you think the mitigating factors should have led to a reduced punishment, and how do you think this absence will realistically affect the Steelers over the next 2 games? The reality for the Steelers now is that this situation doesn't exist in isolation. It blends directly into what this team showed on the field against Detroit and what it says about who they are becoming as the season moves into its most critical stretch. Because while the DK Metcalf suspension dominates the headlines, it happened in the middle of one of the most complete and physically imposing performances the Steelers have put together in years, a game that revealed both how high the ceiling might be and how thin the margin can become if discipline slips at the wrong moment. What stood out most in that win over the Lions was not a single highlight play, but a collective statement. This was a Detroit team that came in as one of the most committed rushing offenses in the league, built around Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, and the Steelers simply erased that part of their identity. Holding a top 5 rushing attack to just 15 yards is not an accident, and it doesn't happen without dominance up front and complete buy-in from every level of the defense. That effort matters even more now, because it shows how this team believes it can win games when circumstances turn against it, whether that's injuries, suspensions, or hostile environments. Cam Hayward's performance in that game deserves special attention because it connects directly to this moment. At his age, playing the volume of snaps he's playing, and doing it at an elite level, is something the league simply hasn't seen before. He wasn't just clogging lanes. He was diagnosing plays, blowing up misdirection, and harassing Jared Goff while still anchoring the run defense. The fact that he was credited with his first missed tackle of the entire season in this game almost sounds fictional, yet it underscores how locked in he's been. When a veteran leader like that is setting the tone, it sends a clear message to the rest of the roster about standards and accountability, especially at a time when emotions and outside noise could easily pull a team off course. Alex Highsmith's impact also can't be separated from the larger story. Since returning, he's been relentless, particularly as a backside defender who completely shut down Detroit's attempts to stretch the field horizontally in the run game. Much of the criticism around him this season is focused on availability rather than performance, and games like this are reminders that when he's on the field, he's a difference maker. That kind of consistency from core defensive players is exactly what allows the Steelers to believe they can weather storms like the Metcalf suspension without abandoning their identity. Offensively, the trench play against Detroit was arguably just as important. Troy Fautanu and Zach Frazier set the tone, especially in the run game, moving defenders off the ball and creating space that allowed Jaylen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell to thrive. Warren, in particular, looked decisive and explosive, bouncing back from a quieter week and reminding everyone why this backfield works best when both runners are involved. Arthur Smith's usage of the duo finally felt balanced and intentional, with clear roles that maximized each player's strengths rather than forcing one to fit into the other's mold. Aaron Rodgers' role in all of this also matters as the Steelers move forward without Metcalf. While he didn't play a flawless game, he managed it with the calm and control of a veteran who understands situation, momentum, and risk. That kind of steadiness becomes even more valuable when the receiving room is reshuffled and younger or less established players are asked to step into bigger roles. The expectation is not that Rodgers suddenly carries the offense on his back, but that he continues to be a field general who protects the football and puts players in positions to succeed. The most encouraging takeaway from the Detroit game, and the one that gives context to surviving the next stretch, is the emergence of young contributors across the roster. Jack Sawyer forcing a fumble against Penei Sewell on the opening drive wasn't just a splash play, it was a signal that rookies and rotational players are ready for big moments. Keanu Benton and Derek Harmon controlling the interior, Joey Porter Jr. holding up in coverage, and players like Y.A. Black and Spencer Anderson making meaningful impacts all point to a team that is building depth the right way. Even on offense, Scotty Miller stepping in and delivering on critical downs showed that this roster isn't as top-heavy as it may appear on paper. That depth is exactly what the Steelers are leaning on now. Losing Metcalf hurts, and there's no spinning that away. But the broader picture shows a team that has already been forced to adapt repeatedly this season and has often responded with its most physical and disciplined football. The challenge now is ensuring that the emotional weight of this suspension doesn't linger or become a distraction. Mike Tomlin's message internally has always centered on control. Control what you can control, ignore what you can't, and let preparation dictate outcomes. As the next 2 games approach, every snap will be viewed through the lens of this absence. Every missed opportunity in the passing game will be magnified. Every win will be framed as proof of resilience. And every loss will raise questions about whether this moment could have been avoided. That's the reality of playing in December with playoff stakes on the line. The Steelers are not chasing style points anymore. They're chasing survival, positioning, and the chance to control their own destiny heading into the final week. This situation has tested the balance between player protection, personal responsibility, and league discipline, but it has also exposed something else: the Steelers' belief in who they are. A defense that can dominate, an offense that can adjust, and a locker room that knows it can't afford internal fractures right now. The next chapter will tell us a lot about whether that belief is justified. What makes this stretch so revealing for the Steelers is that it forces clarity. There's no hiding behind hypotheticals anymore, no room to talk about what this team could be if everything went perfectly. The DK Metcalf suspension stripped that comfort away. What's left is a roster that has to define itself through execution, discipline, and cohesion, especially in moments where adversity is no longer theoretical but very real. One of the underdiscussed aspects of this situation is how it reshapes the emotional hierarchy of the offense. Metcalf is not just a top target, he's an emotional catalyst. His physicality, his presence, and the way defenses have to account for him changes spacing even when he's not touching the football. Without him on the field, every route concept tightens, every window gets smaller, and every receiver is exposed more directly to man coverage. That puts pressure not just on replacements, but on play design and timing. It forces the Steelers to be sharper, not flashier. This is where the tight end group becomes even more central. Pat Freiermuth and Johnny Smith showed against Detroit that they can be reliable chain movers, especially when defenses commit to stopping the run. Their ability to work the middle of the field, absorb contact, and secure contested catches becomes critical when perimeter explosiveness takes a hit. Connor Hayward's role also grows here, not just as a blocker, but as a versatile piece who can disguise intentions and keep defenses honest. These aren't glamorous adjustments, but they're winning football adjustments. On the perimeter, the spotlight will be unforgiving. Marquez Valdes-Scantling's speed gives the Steelers a vertical element, but consistency has always been the question. Drops and missed opportunities were already noted, and now the margin for error disappears. Roman Wilson's development curve accelerates whether he's ready or not, and Ben Skoronek's value as a physical, assignment-sound player becomes more important than his stat line. None of this is ideal, but it is honest. This is what depth is actually for. Defensively, the burden doesn't change, but the responsibility sharpens. The Steelers cannot afford slow starts or wasted possessions when the offense is operating with reduced firepower. That means Kim Hayward, Alex Highsmith, Keanu Benton, Derek Harmon, and the rest of the front must continue to dictate terms early. It means Joey Porter Jr. has to erase space on the outside so the defense can commit numbers to the box. It means Patrick Queen accepting tough coverage assignments so the run defense stays intact. The blueprint from the Lions game isn't optional anymore. It's mandatory. There's also an undercurrent here about leadership. Moments like this test not just schemes, but locker room gravity. Veterans set tone when narratives get loud. Aaron Rodgers' calm command, Cam Hayward's relentless standard, and the way younger players like Jack Sawyer and Troy Fautanu have responded to increased responsibility all point toward a group that understands what's at stake. This isn't about proving anyone wrong externally. It's about maintaining internal trust. And then there's the league-wide implication that lingers over all of this. The NFL has drawn its line, but it has also exposed a gap. Players are expected to absorb abuse until they don't, and when they react, the punishment is swift and severe. Whether the appeal reduces the suspension or not, this situation will not be forgotten quickly. It will be referenced the next time something like this happens, and it will shape how players think about their own boundaries. For now, though, the Steelers don't get the luxury of waiting for broader change. They have games to win. Everything from here forward carries weight. Every snap without Metcalf is a reminder of how quickly circumstances can shift. Every successful drive is proof that preparation still matters more than noise. And every mistake will be magnified, not because this team is fragile, but because expectations are real again. What can't be ignored now is how narrow the emotional line becomes when a team reaches this point in the season. The Steelers are no longer playing weeks in advance. They're playing moments. Every drive, every third down, every red zone decision carries amplified meaning because the safety net is gone. That's what makes discipline and situational awareness the quiet themes of this entire stretch. Not just staying out of trouble, but understanding exactly when to push and when to stay within yourself. The coaching staff knows this too. Arthur Smith's approach over the next games is unlikely to chase replacement production for DK Metcalf in a one-for-one sense. That would be a mistake. Instead, the offense will likely lean further into multiplicity and efficiency. Shorter concepts, defined reads, Play action that pulls linebackers just enough to open windows rather than asking receivers to win isolated battles snap after snap. That's not conservative football. That's calculated football, and it fits the personnel that's available right now. This also places added importance on ball security and game management. Against Detroit, one of the few moments of real danger came from self-inflicted wounds, like the Darnell Washington fumble. Even though his overall impact as a blocker was significant, moments like that loom larger now. The Steelers don't have the margin to trade possessions unnecessarily. When the offense grinds out a drive, it has to end with points. When the defense forces a stop, the offense has to respond by flipping field position at minimum. Complementary football isn't a slogan anymore, it's a requirement. Special teams, often overlooked when things are stable, becomes another pressure point. Snaps, holds, coverage lanes, timing on returns, all of it has to be clean. There's no emotional buffer to absorb a mistake. One breakdown can swing momentum in a way that's harder to recover from without your top offensive weapon available. That's why details that barely register in September suddenly feel massive in December. What's fascinating about this moment is that it's also revealing something encouraging. The Steelers are not responding like a team waiting for something to go wrong. The tone coming out of the locker room, based strictly on what's visible on the field, suggests a group that understands exactly where it stands. Younger players are not shrinking from responsibility. Veterans are not deflecting accountability. There's a seriousness to the way this team is playing that wasn't always present earlier in the season. The DK Metcalf situation will continue to be debated. The appeal will be discussed. Comparisons will be made. But inside the walls of the organization, the conversation has already shifted. This is no longer about what happened in Detroit. It's about what happens next. How this team responds without one of its most visible playmakers will define how it's remembered, regardless of how the suspension ultimately resolves. This is the kind of stretch that reshapes reputations. Players become trusted. Roles become permanent. Weaknesses get exposed, but strengths harden. The Steelers are stepping into that stretch right now, without excuses and without guarantees, only with the football they put on the field. There's also a psychological edge to all of this that doesn't always show up on the stat sheet, but it absolutely shows up on Sundays.